Joster echoes of Athens, a whisper of olive groves. The sun hangs low over the olive groves outside Athens, casting everything in that particular golden light that exists nowhere else on earth. You can almost feel the warmth on your skin, the way it would have touched the faces of women who walked these same paths 2,500 years ago. Their sandals wore smooth stones even smoother. Their voices carried on evening breezes that still whisper through silver-green leaves. Tonight we're going to walk with them. Not the women you learned about in school, not the wives of famous men or the mythical goddesses carved in marble. No, tonight we meet the women whose names were never written in stone, but whose lives were carved deep into the rhythm of daily existence. The bread bakers and olive pressers, the midwives and mourners, the daughters who never became the sons their fathers wanted, and the mothers who loved them fiercely anyway. Close your eyes and let the Mediterranean evening settle around you. Can you smell it? That particular combination of dust and herbs, of wood smoke and ripening fruit? This is the scent that filled their lungs every day. This is the air they breathed while they worked, while they worried, while they dreamed of things they couldn't always speak aloud. The olive trees stretch endlessly in every direction, their ancient trunks twisted into shapes that tell stories of survival. Some of these trees, they might have been saplings when our women walked among them. They've watched empires rise and fall, watched the same human dramas play out generation after generation. Women carrying water jars on their hips, women singing work songs that made the hours pass more quickly, women sharing secrets in the spaces between words. There's something about twilight that makes the past feel closer, isn't there? As if the boundary between then and now becomes more porous when the light grows soft. You can almost see them if you look sideways. Shadows moving between the trees, the flash of a clay vessel, the whisper of linen against skin. Let's follow one of those shadows. Her name is Melania, though you won't find her in any history book. She's 17, with olive oil permanently embedded under her fingernails and shoulders, strong from carrying amphoras since she could walk. Right now, she's making her way through the grove as the first stars begin to appear, and she's thinking about the conversation she overheard in the marketplace today. Two men were arguing about democracy, about who deserves a voice in the running of the city. They spoke as if the world consisted only of citizens like themselves, as if the women who fed them and bore their children and kept their households running were somehow less real, less worthy of consideration. Melania knows better. She knows that democracy, as beautiful as it sounds in the speeches of important men, exists because of invisible women's work. The grain that becomes bread doesn't grind itself. The oil that lights their lamps doesn't press itself. The children who will grow up to be tomorrow's citizens don't raise themselves. But she also knows better than to say this out loud. Instead, she carries it with her into the evening. This awareness of her own significance in a world that pretends she doesn't matter. It's a weight that sits differently than the water jars, heavier in some ways, more complex. The olive grove holds space for these thoughts. It always has. Trees don't judge. They don't tell you to smile more or speak less or make yourself smaller. They simply exist, patient and enduring, offering shade and shelter, and the quiet wisdom that comes from staying rooted while the world changes around you. Melania reaches her favorite tree, one with a trunk so wide she can't wrap her arms around it, with branches that form a natural seat, just the right height for thinking. She settles into this familiar embrace and lets the day's tensions begin to dissolve. This is her sanctuary, the place she comes when the demands of family life become too much, when her mother's expectations clash with her own secret dreams, when the future feels like a narrow path with no room for wandering. From here, she can see the lights of Athens beginning to twinkle in the distance. Each light represents a household, a family, a collection of human stories unfolding in the growing darkness. How many of those stories are women's stories? How many dreams are being set aside for duty? How many voices are being saved for tomorrow, always tomorrow? The evening air carries the sound of distant laughter, probably from one of the symposiums where men gather to drink wine and discuss philosophy. They'll talk late into the night about truth and beauty and the nature of existence, never thinking to ask the women who serve them what they might have to contribute to such conversations. But here, in the olive grove, different conversations happen. Here, women have always gathered to share the wisdom that comes from living close to the rhythms of birth and death, growth and harvest, love and loss. They speak in practical poetry, in observations about human nature gleaned from watching children grow and parents age, in insights about community gathered from managing households and mediating family disputes. This wisdom doesn't get written down. It doesn't get carved in stone or copied by scribes. It lives in the spaces between official history, in the pause between one generation and the next, in the breath between question and answer. Melania knows she's part of this tradition, even if she doesn't have words for it yet. She feels it in the way her grandmother's hands move when she kneads bread, as if the dough holds memory. She sees it in her mother's eyes when she thinks no one is watching. That look of understanding, something vast and unspoken about what it means to be human. The stars are fully visible now, scattered across the darkening sky like seeds thrown by some cosmic gardener. The same constellations that guided ships across the wine-dark sea also watched over women like Melania as they navigated the more intimate territories of family and community, love and survival. There's comfort in this continuity, in knowing that women have always found ways to claim space for themselves, even in societies that tried to make them invisible. They've always gathered in kitchens and gardens, at wells and in groves like this one, to share the truths that official history overlooks. The olive tree's branches rustle softly in the evening breeze, and for a moment it sounds almost like conversation, like the whispered confidences of countless women who have sought shelter in this same spot over the centuries. Their stories layer upon each other like fallen leaves, creating rich soil for new growth. Melania doesn't know it yet, but she's part of an unbroken chain of women who have refused to be erased by their circumstances, who have found ways to nurture their inner lives even when the outer world offered little room for such luxuries, who have passed down their strength in small gestures and quiet moments, in lullabies and work songs, in the patient teaching of hands and hearts. The night is settling deeper now, wrapping around the olive grove like a familiar blanket. Soon Melania will need to return home, to slip back into the role that's been assigned to her. But for now, she sits in the embrace of this ancient tree and feels the presence of all the women who came before her. All the women who understood that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to disappear. The olive groves remember everything. They hold space for all the stories that official history forgets. And tonight, they're ready to share some of those stories with you, if you're ready to listen. Fragments of pottery, glimpses of daily life. In the soft light filtering through the olive branches, we can almost see them, the fragments. Scattered across millennia, these pieces of pottery tell stories that no historian ever thought to record. A shard here, a painted curve there, each one holding the imprint of a woman's hand. Imagine, if you will, walking through an ancient Athenian marketplace just as the sun reaches its peak. The air shimmers with heat and possibility. Vendors call out their wares, but if you listen closely, really listen, you can hear something else entirely. The quiet conversations, the shared glances, the small rebellions that happened in the spaces between official life. Here, painted on a fragment no larger than your palm, we see her. A woman grinding grain, but look closer. See how the artist captured the tilt of her head? She's not alone. There's another figure beside her, barely visible now, worn away by time. But we can still make out the gesture. hands reaching toward each other, a moment of connection preserved in clay. These fragments were never meant to survive. They were everyday objects, used and discarded, broken and forgotten. Kitchen bowls, water jugs, storage vessels, the pottery that held the rhythm of women's lives. And yet, somehow, they endured, as if the clay itself refused to let these stories disappear completely. On another piece, delicate as a whisper, we find 3 women gathered around what might be a loom. Their heads lean together, creating an intimate triangle of shared space. You can almost hear their voices. The way women's conversations have always woven together the practical and the profound. Pass me that thread. Did you hear about Helena's daughter? My back aches today. Do you think the rains will come? But look at their faces, carefully painted by an artist who understood something about women's inner lives. These aren't the idealized beauties of official art. These are real faces, marked by thought and feeling. One woman's eyes crinkle with laughter. Another's mouth is set in concentration. The third has the expression every woman recognizes. That distant look that says she's carrying something heavy, something that can only be shared in moments like these. The pottery remembers their hands. Every curve of every vessel was shaped by fingers that knew the weight of water, the texture of grain, the resistance of clay. These weren't just functional objects. They were extensions of the women who used them. Each crack and chip tells a story of daily life, of the endless cycle of filling and emptying, of nurturing and sustaining. Here's what the history books miss: the way women created entire worlds within the constraints they were given. On this fragment, we see a woman reaching into a large storage jar, but painted on the jar itself is a tiny scene: women dancing, as if even their pottery needed to hold space for joy, for the parts of themselves that couldn't be contained by society's expectations. And this piece, barely more than a curved line with a few brush strokes, shows us something extraordinary: 2 women's hands reaching across what might be a courtyard wall. The simplest gesture, but painted with such care that you can feel the intention behind it, the need to connect, the refusal to be isolated. These fragments teach us that love and friendship found ways to flourish even in the most restricted circumstances. Women created networks of support and understanding that existed parallel to official society. They shared recipes and remedies, yes, but they also shared dreams and fears, hopes and heartbreaks. The pottery holds their laughter too. On this shard, a woman balances a water jug on her head while gesturing animatedly to someone outside the frame. Her whole body speaks of movement, of life lived fully even within narrow boundaries. The artist caught her mid-story, mid-gesture, mid-breath. What strikes me most about these fragments is their intimacy. These weren't public monuments or official portraits. These were private moments, captured almost accidentally. A woman pausing in her work to comfort a friend. Another stealing a moment of solitude by a window. The quiet heroism of daily life, preserved in clay. As you settle deeper into rest tonight, let these images wash over you. The gentle curves of pottery shaped by caring hands, the soft voices of women sharing their days, the knowledge that connection and love have always found ways to survive, to leave traces, to whisper their stories across the centuries. These fragments remind us that we are part of an unbroken chain of women who have found ways to nurture each other, to create beauty in small moments, to leave marks of love that endure long after the official stories have faded away. The quiet courtyard, secrets in the water's ripple, and in this unbroken chain, we find ourselves drawn deeper into their world, following the soft echo of footsteps across worn stone, toward a place where these women could truly breathe. Picture, if you will, a small courtyard tucked away from the main thoroughfares of ancient Athens. Not grand or imposing like the public spaces where men conducted their business, but intimate, sheltered, alive with the gentle music of water. At its heart sits a fountain, simple in design yet profound in purpose. Water flows from a carved stone vessel, creating ripples that catch the dappled sunlight, filtering through the olive branches overhead. The sound is hypnotic, a soft, constant whisper that seems to invite secrets, to promise that whatever is spoken here will be held safely. This is where Melania comes when the weight of expectation grows too heavy, when the performance of being the perfect daughter, the dutiful future wife, becomes almost unbearable. She settles on the stone bench beside the fountain, her fingers trailing in the cool water. The ripples spread outward in perfect circles, expanding, overlapping, creating new patterns before fading into stillness. Like thoughts, she thinks, like the words we carry but rarely speak aloud. Other women find their way here too. There's Helena, whose husband died young, leaving her to navigate the complex world of widowhood, managing property she legally cannot own, making decisions she's not supposed to make. She comes to sit by the water when the loneliness feels too vast, when she needs to remember her own strength. And Sophia, barely 15 but already promised in marriage to a man she's never spoken to. She traces patterns in the water with her fingertips, wondering what it would feel like to choose her own path, to wake up one morning and walk in whatever direction called to her heart. The fountain holds space for all of them. In its presence, they can set down the masks they wear in the outer world, can speak the thoughts that would be deemed inappropriate, dangerous, or simply unimportant by those who write the official histories. Sometimes I dream of traveling. Melania whispers to the water, her voice barely audible above its gentle song. Not to visit family or fulfill some duty, but just to see, to know what lies beyond these walls, these expectations. The ripples carry her words outward, and in their movement she imagines her dreams expanding too, touching shores she'll never see, mountains she'll never climb, but somehow making them real through the simple act of speaking them aloud. Helena arrives as the afternoon light begins to soften. She doesn't interrupt Melania's reverie, just settles quietly on the opposite side of the fountain, letting her own fingers find the water's surface. They sit in comfortable silence, two women from different generations, sharing the same need for this sanctuary. "I managed the grain stores today," Helena finally says, her voice carrying both pride and exhaustion. "The overseer tried to cheat us, quoted prices that would have cost us dearly, but I knew the true market rates. I negotiated fairly." Melania looks up, seeing in Helena's face the quiet satisfaction of competence recognized, of intelligence put to use despite a world that pretends women possess neither. "You're stronger than they know," Melania says softly. "We all are," Helena replies, her gaze encompassing not just the two of them, but all the women who have found solace in this space. That's what frightens them. When Sophia joins them later, her eyes red from crying, they make room without question. The fountain's song seems to grow gentler, more welcoming. In this circle of water and stone, tears are not weakness but honesty. Grief is not burden but truth. "I wanted to study," Sophia confesses, her words tumbling out like water over stone. "I wanted to learn about the stars, about mathematics, about philosophy. I wanted to understand how the world works." Her dreams join the others in the fountain's embrace, rippling outward, creating new patterns of possibility, even as the reality of her situation remains unchanged. As evening approaches, the three women sit together in the gathering dusk. The fountain continues its eternal conversation with itself, water meeting stone, creating sound, creating movement, creating a space where the impossible becomes momentarily possible. They don't solve each other's problems here. They don't need to. What they offer is something more precious, the recognition that their inner lives matter, that their dreams and fears and hopes are worthy of witness, worthy of the gentle acknowledgement that ripples across the water's surface. In this quiet courtyard surrounded by the soft whisper of flowing water, they practice a radical act. They exist fully as themselves, not as daughters or wives or widows or future mothers, but as complete human beings with rich inner worlds that deserve space to breathe. The fountain holds their secrets, carries their dreams, reflects their faces back to them with the kind of clarity that only comes in moments of perfect stillness. Unwritten poems, the tablet and the stylus. As evening deepens around them, the three women gradually drift apart, each carrying something precious from their shared moment by the fountain. Helena returns to her household duties, Sophia to her evening prayers, and young Melania, she finds herself drawn to a quiet corner of the house where shadows gather like old friends. Here, tucked beneath a window that frames the last silver light of day, sits a simple wooden writing tablet, its wax surface smooth and waiting. Beside it rests a bronze stylus, elegant in its simplicity, worn smooth by countless hands that came before. This tablet belongs to her father, used for household accounts and business correspondence. But in these stolen evening moments, when the day's obligations have been fulfilled and the house settles into peaceful quiet, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a doorway to the words that live inside her heart. Melania lifts the stylus, feeling its familiar weight in her fingers. The bronze is cool at first, then warms to her touch, as if awakening to possibility. She thinks of the poets whose verses she has heard whispered in the women's quarters, fragments of Sappho's words that survive like precious seeds, scattered by women who memorize them in secret. Some say cavalry, some say infantry, some say ships are the most beautiful things on this dark earth. The words rise in her memory, Sappho's voice reaching across the centuries. But I say, it is whatever you love. What does she love? The question settles over her like twilight itself, gentle but persistent. She loves the way morning light catches in olive leaves, the sound of her mother humming while she weaves, the feeling of understanding that passed between the three women at the fountain. She loves the stories that live in pottery shards, the dreams that swim in water, the possibility that her own thoughts might matter. The stylus hovers above the wax, trembling slightly. To write is to make permanent, to claim space, to say that her inner world deserves to exist beyond the boundaries of her own mind. It is both the smallest and the largest act of rebellion she can imagine. She begins slowly, carefully, pressing letters into the soft wax. Not the formal script she learned for copying household lists, but something more flowing, more true to the rhythm of her thoughts. The words come haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. In the space between what is expected and what is felt, I find myself. The stylus moves across the tablet like a dancer, creating curves and lines that spell out truths she has never spoken aloud. She writes about the weight of always being watched, always being measured against some invisible standard of proper womanhood. She writes about the longing that lives in her chest, formless but persistent, for something larger than the life that has been mapped out for her. She writes about Helena's knowing smile, about Sophia's quiet strength, about the way water can hold secrets without judgment. She writes about the pottery fragments and the lives they represent, all those forgotten women who loved and dreamed and struggled, whose stories deserve to be remembered. The tablet fills slowly, each word chosen with care, each line a small act of courage. This is her poetry, raw and honest, unpolished but true. These are the verses that will never be performed in public squares, never be carved in marble, never be preserved in great libraries, but they exist, here, now. in this moment of perfect solitude. As she writes, something shifts inside her, the day's accumulated weight, the constant awareness of how she should sit, speak, move, begins to lift. In the act of putting words to wax, she reclaims something essential, her own voice, her own truth, her own small corner of eternity. She thinks of all the tablets like this one, in houses throughout Athens, in cities across the ancient world. How many women have held styluses in trembling hands, pressing their secrets into wax by lamplight? How many poems have been written and then smoothed away, leaving no trace except the memory of their creation? The thought should sadden her, but instead it fills her with a strange comfort. She is part of something larger, a quiet sisterhood of women who refuse to let their inner lives disappear entirely. Even if these words will be erased tomorrow, even if no one else will ever read them, they exist tonight. They matter tonight. The last light fades from the window, and Melania sets down the stylus. The tablet holds her words, her truth, her small rebellion against silence. Tomorrow she will smooth the wax clean, prepare it for her father's business correspondence. But tonight, it belongs to her. She runs her finger gently over the surface, feeling the slight indentations where the stylus pressed deepest. These marks in wax are like the marks left on her soul by this moment of perfect freedom, invisible to others, but permanent in their own way. In houses across the city, other tablets rest in other corners, some still holding traces of women's words, others waiting to receive them. The unwritten poems of Athens, the unexpressed longings, the secret rebellions, all finding their way into the world one stolen moment at a time. Roman nights, jasmine and moonlight on the terrace. Time moves like water, flowing from one ancient city to another, carrying stories across centuries. The olive groves of Athens fade into memory as we find ourselves drawn forward through the mists of history to another place where women gathered in moonlight, where jasmine bloomed on terraces, and where hearts spoke in whispers. Rome, the eternal city, where marble gleamed white under starlight and the scent of night-blooming flowers drifted through villa gardens. Here, in this empire that stretched across the known world, women moved through lives both more visible and more constrained than their sisters in Athens. They wore silk instead of wool, gold instead of bronze, but still they sought those sacred spaces, those moments of truth, those connections that fed the soul. On a terrace high above the Tiber, jasmine vines climb marble columns, their star-shaped flowers opening only in darkness, releasing their intoxicating perfume into the warm night air. The moon, full and luminous, casts everything in silver light, transforming the ordinary world into something magical, something possible. This is Livia's terrace, though not the empress of that name, but another Livia, a merchant's daughter whose father's ships bring spices from distant lands, whose mother's family claims descent from old patrician blood. She stands at the balustrade, her stola the color of deep wine, her dark hair adorned with pearls that catch the moonlight like captured stars. But she is not alone in her contemplation. Footsteps whisper across the marble, and another figure emerges from the shadows of the colonnade. Claudia, her dearest friend since childhood, her confidant in all things, approaches with the careful grace of someone accustomed to navigating the complexities of Roman society. Her own dress, pale as morning mist, seems to float around her as she moves. The jasmine is particularly fragrant tonight, Claudia murmurs, settling beside her friend at the marble railing. Below them, the city spreads out in gentle darkness, oil lamps flickering like earthbound constellations in windows and courtyards. Livia nods, breathing deeply of the perfumed air. My grandmother always said jasmine blooms strongest when the moon is full, as if the flowers are trying to compete with her beauty. They stand in comfortable silence. These two young women on the threshold of marriages that have been arranged, alliances that will benefit their families, unions that will define the rest of their lives. Tomorrow, there will be meetings with matrons who will discuss dowries and household management. Next week, there will be formal presentations to prospective husbands. But tonight, there is only moonlight and jasmine and the precious freedom of unguarded conversation. Do you ever wonder, Claudia begins, then pauses, as if testing the safety of her words. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to choose for yourself? The question hangs in the perfumed air like incense, sacred and slightly dangerous. Livia turns to study her friend's profile, noting the way the moonlight reveals both hope and resignation in her expression. Every day, Livia whispers, her voice barely audible above the gentle rustle of jasmine leaves. I dream of it every day. Below them, the Tiber flows on its ancient course, carrying the dreams and sorrows of countless generations toward the sea. Above them, the same stars that witnessed the founding of this great city continue their eternal dance, indifferent to the small rebellions of mortal hearts. Claudia reaches for Livia's hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy intimacy of shared secrets. Tell me, she says, if you could choose, what would your life look like? Livia closes her eyes, letting the jasmine-scented breeze wash over her face. I would travel, she says slowly, to all the places my father's ships have been. I would see the spice markets of Alexandria, the libraries of Athens, the temples of distant lands. I would learn languages and customs and stories that no Roman woman has ever heard. And would you marry? Claudia asks, though her voice suggests she already knows the answer. Perhaps, Livia says, opening her eyes to gaze at the moon, but only for love, only if I found someone who saw me, truly saw me. Not just the dowry I bring or the connections my family offers, but me, my thoughts, my dreams, my stubborn heart that refuses to be satisfied with embroidery and household accounts. Claudia squeezes her hand gently. You will find a way to be yourself, even within the life that awaits you. We both will. Women always have. The jasmine releases another wave of fragrance, as if blessing their quiet rebellion. Their refusal to accept that duty must mean the death of dreams. In this moment, on this terrace, under this ancient moon, they are not commodities to be traded between families. They are simply themselves, two souls sharing truth in the darkness. And somewhere, in other villas throughout the city, other young women stand at other windows, breathing the same jasmine-scented air, harboring the same impossible dreams, finding their own ways to remain human in a world that would reduce them to their usefulness. The moon continues her journey across the star-scattered sky, witness to 10,000 such conversations, keeper of 10,000 such secrets, guardian of the eternal human longing for choice, for love, for the freedom to write one's own story. Threads of connection, the basket of wool, in the quiet hours before dawn, when the moon begins to fade and the first whisper of morning light touches the eastern hills, we find ourselves drawn to a different kind of sanctuary, not the grand courtyards or marble terraces of the wealthy, but the humble working rooms where women gather in circles, their hands busy with the ancient rhythms of creation. Here, in a modest home near the Forum, sits a woven basket filled with wool. The fibers catch the lamplight, some creamy white like fresh milk, Others dyed in soft earth tones, ochre and madder root, the deep blue of woad. This is not merely wool, this is possibility. Threads waiting to become something greater than themselves, much like the women who will work with them. The basket rests on a low wooden table, worn smooth by countless hands, surrounded by simple stools where women have gathered for generations. The room itself tells stories. Walls darkened by lamp smoke, floors worn by the shuffle of sandaled feet, the air still holding the faint scent of yesterday's bread and the lingering warmth of shared laughter. As the first pale light of dawn filters through the narrow window, we hear the soft sound of footsteps on stone. Livia enters quietly, her movements careful not to wake the household. She settles beside the basket, running her fingers through the soft wool, feeling its texture, its weight, its promise. Soon, another set of footsteps. Claudia appears in the doorway, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but her face brightening at the sight of her friend. They exchange no words. None are needed. This is their time, their ritual, their escape into the meditative rhythm of creation. One by one, other women join them. Helena, whose weathered hands speak of decades spent spinning, her touch gentle but sure as she selects her fibers. Young Antonia, barely 15, watching the older women with eager eyes, learning not just the craft but the unspoken language of female solidarity. They begin to work, fingers teasing the wool into long, even strands. The motion is hypnotic, ancient, connecting them to every woman who has ever sat with wool and spindle, transforming raw material into something useful, something beautiful. Their movements fall into a natural rhythm, like breathing, like heartbeats, like the eternal cycles of the earth itself. In this circle, conversation flows as smoothly as the wool through their fingers, not the careful, measured words they must use in mixed company, but the honest, unguarded speech of women among women. They share small victories, quiet sorrows, the 1,000 tiny observations that make up a life lived in the margins of history. "My daughter spoke her first clear word yesterday," whispers Helena, her voice soft with wonder. "She said mama, and I felt as though the gods themselves had spoken through her." The others smile, understanding completely. These moments, these small miracles, are theirs to treasure. No historian will record them. No poet will sing of them. But they are no less precious for their obscurity. Livia's hands work steadily, pulling and twisting, creating thread that will become cloth, cloth that will become a garment that will warm someone she loves. There is deep satisfaction in this, in creating something lasting, something useful, something that carries within it the love of the maker. "I dreamed again last night," Claudia murmurs, her voice barely audible above the gentle sounds of their work. "I dreamed I was weaving, but instead of wool, I was working with moonbeams, creating cloth that shimmered like starlight. The image hangs in the air, beautiful and impossible. But here, in this circle of understanding, impossible dreams are welcome. They are treasured, nurtured, allowed to exist without judgment or dismissal. As the morning light grows stronger, the basket of wool gradually empties, transformed by skilled hands into neat skeins of thread. But something else has been created here, something invisible, but equally valuable. Bonds have been strengthened, burdens have been shared, spirits have been renewed. These women understand something that the larger world often forgets, that true wealth lies not in gold or property, but in connection, in the knowledge that you are seen, understood, valued for who you are, rather than what you can provide. The wool basket sits nearly empty now, its contents transformed, its purpose fulfilled. But tomorrow, it will be filled again, and the women will gather once more, continuing this ancient dance of creation and community, this quiet rebellion against a world that would isolate them, diminish them, render them invisible. In the growing light of morning, as the city begins to stir and the demands of the day reassert themselves, these women carry something precious within them, the memory of this peaceful hour, this sacred circle, this reminder that they are not alone, that their stories matter, that their hands can create beauty even in the smallest, most ordinary moments. The basket waits, patient and eternal, ready to hold tomorrow's possibilities. Baths of Caracalla, a moment of shared repose. The wool settles into stillness, the morning conversations fade into memory, and we find ourselves carried forward through time to another place where women gathered, where stories were shared in whispered confidence. The baths of Caracalla rise before us like a temple to human connection, their soaring arches catching the golden light of late afternoon. Here in ancient Rome, in these vast halls of marble and mosaic, women from across the empire come not just to cleanse their bodies, but to tend their souls. The air is thick with steam and the scent of rose oil, lavender, precious unguents that transform the simple act of bathing into something sacred. Water cascades from bronze spouts shaped like dolphins, their mouths open in eternal song, while beneath our feet, intricate mosaics tell stories of sea nymphs and goddesses, reminders that this space belongs, if only for these stolen hours, to the feminine divine. Listen, can you hear them? The soft splash of water, the gentle murmur of conversation echoing off marble walls, the quiet laughter that speaks of shared understanding. In the tepidarium, the warm room where bodies adjust slowly to the heat, women of all stations find themselves equal in their vulnerability, their humanity. Here sits Aurelia, a senator's wife whose public smile never wavers, whose dinner parties are legendary for their perfection. But in this steamy sanctuary, with her carefully arranged hair loosened and her shoulders bare, she speaks quietly to the woman beside her about the exhaustion that lives behind her eyes, the weight of always being watched, always being judged. I dream sometimes, she whispers to Julia, a merchant's daughter from Gaul, of a small house by the sea where no one knows my name, where I could tend a garden and speak only when I choose to speak. Julia nods, understanding without judgment. She knows about performing, about smiling when your heart aches, about carrying others' expectations like stones in your chest. In my village, she replies, her accent soft and musical. My grandmother used to say that water remembers everything, every tear, every joy, every secret we release into its embrace. They sink deeper into the warm pool, letting the mineral-rich water support their tired bodies, their weary spirits. Around them, other conversations bloom like flowers in the steam, stories shared between strangers who somehow, in this sacred space, become sisters. In the caldarium, the hot room where sweat pearls on marble benches, an older woman named Cornelia tends to a young bride named Livia, not our earlier Livia, but another. For these names are common as olive trees, each one carrying her own particular joys and sorrows. Cornelia's hands are gentle as she applies oil to the girl's shoulders, her touch speaking of mothers and daughters, of the wisdom passed between women when no men are watching. Marriage is not what the poets tell us, she says quietly, but it is not the prison your mother fears either. You will find your way, as we all do, one day at a time. The young woman's eyes fill with tears that mingle with the steam, with the sweat of her nervousness. "I don't know how to be a wife," she confesses. "I don't know how to be anything but myself." "Then be yourself," Cornelia replies, her voice carrying the authority of years, of survived sorrows and discovered joys. "Be yourself, fiercely and without apology. The rest is just performance." In the pools around them, women float in various stages of relaxation, their bodies finally free from the constraints of stola and pala, their minds released from the endless calculations of propriety and expectation. Some speak, sharing the intimate details of their lives, their hopes, their fears. Others simply exist in comfortable silence, letting the water hold them, cradle them, remind them that they too deserve tenderness. The late afternoon light streams through the high windows, casting dancing patterns on the water's surface. And for these precious hours, time seems suspended here, in this space designed for pleasure, for restoration. Women remember what it feels like to breathe deeply, to laugh without covering their mouths, to speak their truth without fear. A group of young women, friends from childhood now scattered by marriage to different households, reunite in the cool pool, their voices bright with the joy of recognition, of being known. They share news of their children, their households, but more importantly, they share the secret parts of themselves that they've almost forgotten existed. "Do you remember?" one begins, and they all lean closer. Conspirators in the beautiful crime of remembering who they used to be, who they still are, beneath all the roles they've learned to play. As the sun begins to set, casting the great baths in amber light, these women know their time here is drawing to a close. Soon they will dress again, arrange their hair, step back into their public selves, but something has been restored here. Something essential has been remembered, in the gentle lapping of water against marble, in the soft echoes of women's voices, in the steam that rises like incense. We find a truth as old as time itself, that healing happens in community, that strength is born in moments of shared vulnerability, that sometimes the most radical act is simply being seen. Huiser echoes of wisdom, scrolls and silent libraries. The marble halls fade behind us, and we find ourselves drawn deeper into the ancient world, to places where knowledge itself was sanctuary, where scrolls held secrets, and where women's minds found freedom in the quiet pursuit of wisdom. Here, in the great library of Alexandria, where papyrus scrolls stretch endlessly along cedar shelves, where the scent of ink and parchment mingles with frankincense, we discover another kind of gathering place, another space where women carved out room to breathe. The morning light filters through high windows, casting long golden rectangles across the reading tables, and there, bent over a scroll of Sappho's poetry, sits a young woman named Thais. Her fingers trace the ancient Greek letters, her lips moving silently as she reads, and in her eyes, we see the spark of recognition, the joy of finding herself reflected in words written centuries before her birth. She is not alone here, though the silence might suggest otherwise. At another table, an older woman named Demetria carefully copies astronomical observations, her stylus moving with practiced precision, preserving calculations that map the movement of stars, the rhythm of her work steady as breathing, meditative as prayer. These women have found something precious in this temple of learning, not just knowledge, but permission. Permission to think, to question, to lose themselves in ideas that stretch beyond the boundaries of their daily lives. Here, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of ages, they can be scholars, philosophers, seekers of truth. The afternoon deepens, and we move through corridors lined with scrolls, past alcoves where women sit in quiet contemplation, some reading, others writing, all of them participating in an ancient conversation that spans continents and centuries. In one corner, we find a circle of women gathered around a manuscript, their voices low as they discuss the mathematical principles of Euclid, their debate passionate but gentle. Ideas flowing between them like water finding its level. They challenge each other's interpretations, build upon each other's insights, create new understanding through the alchemy of shared intellect. One among them, a woman named Hypatia, her dark eyes bright with curiosity, her hands gesturing as she explains the movement of celestial bodies, the mathematics of harmony, the philosophy of the eternal. She speaks with the authority of someone who has spent countless hours in study, who has found in learning not just knowledge, but liberation. Truth, she says softly, belongs to no one, and to everyone. It cannot be owned, only discovered, shared, passed from hand to hand like a sacred flame. Her words ripple through the group, and we see how learning becomes its own form of connection, how the pursuit of knowledge creates bonds as strong as family, as enduring as stone. The sun moves lower, painting the library walls in shades of amber and gold, and we watch as these women tend to their books with the same care others might give to gardens, or children, or sacred altars. They understand something profound. That knowledge preserved is hope preserved. That every scroll copied, every idea shared, every question asked is an act of faith in the future. In the evening hours, when the library grows quiet, we find women working by oil lamp, their shadows dancing on the walls as they transcribe texts, translate languages, preserve the wisdom of cultures that might otherwise be lost. Their work is patient, methodical, essential, a quiet heroism that asks for no recognition. Here is Miriam, copying Hebrew texts, her careful script preserving stories of strong women, of Ruth and Naomi, of Esther's courage, of Deborah's wisdom. She works through the night, knowing that these stories matter, that they carry something essential forward through time. There is Fatima, translating Greek philosophy into Arabic, building bridges between worlds, ensuring that Aristotle's logic and Plato's ideals will survive the rise and fall of empires. Her bilingual mind moves fluidly between languages, finding perfect words to carry perfect thoughts across the divide of culture and time. And there, in the corner, sits an unnamed woman, writing her own observations, her own questions, her own tentative answers to the mysteries that surround us all. She writes not for fame, but for the pure joy of thinking, of wondering, of adding her small voice to the great human conversation about meaning, purpose, truth. As the night deepens, the library takes on an almost sacred quality. These women become priestesses of a different kind, tending not to gods of marble and gold, but to the divine spark of human curiosity, human creativity, human connection across the vast distances of time and space. Their whispered conversations, their rustling pages, their gentle scratching of stylus on parchment, create a symphony of learning, a lullaby of intellectual devotion that has echoed through centuries, that echoes still in every library, every classroom, every quiet corner where women gather to think, to learn, to grow. In this sanctuary of scrolls and silent dedication, we find another truth about the ancient world, that knowledge was never just about facts, but about connection, about the threads that bind us to those who came before and those who will come after, an endless conversation, a timeless community of minds. enduring patterns, a mosaic of love and loss. The sacred smoke of frankincense rises in delicate spirals, carrying with it the whispered prayers of countless women, their hopes ascending into the marble dome above, their dreams becoming part of something eternal, something that transcends the boundaries of a single life, a single moment, a single breath. And as we watch this ancient ritual unfold, we begin to see the pattern that has woven itself through every story, every courtyard conversation, every stolen moment of writing, every shared glance across the spinning circle, the pattern of women finding each other again and again across the vast expanse of time. In the olive groves where Melania first walked, in the fountain where 3 generations gathered, in the moonlit terrace where dreams were shared like sacred offerings, in the wool basket where dawn brought not just light but understanding, in the marble halls where bodies and souls found healing, in the library where minds touched across centuries, we see the same eternal dance, the same quiet rebellion, the same fierce tenderness. These women, our sisters across time, they loved as we love, with hearts that held both joy and sorrow, both hope and resignation, both acceptance and quiet defiance. They carried the weight of expectations, just as we do, felt the pull between duty and desire, just as we do, found themselves in the spaces between what was asked of them and what they dreamed for themselves, just as we do. The pottery fragments we examined, those intimate glimpses into daily life, they speak of love letters never sent, of friendships that sustained souls through impossible circumstances, of small rebellions that felt enormous in their quiet courage. Each shard tells us that these women understood, as we understand, that love is not always grand gestures and dramatic declarations, but often the simple act of being truly seen, truly known, truly held in someone else's heart. In the fountain's flowing water, we heard the sound of their inner lives, the constant movement of thoughts and feelings that could rarely be spoken aloud. The water carried their secrets, their longings, their moments of pure joy found in the smallest things: a child's laugh, a friend's understanding glance, the satisfaction of work well done, the peace of evening solitude. And in those precious moments when Melania took stylus to tablet, when words flowed from her heart onto wax, we witnessed something revolutionary, not because it changed the world overnight, but because it changed her. Because in claiming her voice, even in secret, even in the darkness of her small room, she joined the eternal chorus of women who have always known that our stories matter, that our inner lives are vast and beautiful and worthy of preservation. The Roman women on their jasmine-scented terrace, sharing fears about futures they could not choose, they remind us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of connection in the face of uncertainty. They found strength not in pretending everything was fine, but in admitting that it wasn't, and discovering they were not alone in that truth. At the wool basket, in the early morning light, we learned that sanctuary can be found in the most ordinary moments, that the rhythm of ancient work can become a meditation, a prayer, a way of weaving not just thread, but community. The women's hands moved in patterns their mothers had taught them, and their mothers before them, creating something both practical and beautiful, something that would outlast their own brief lives, just as their love for each other would outlast the constraints that bound them. In the marble halls of the great baths, where steam rose like incense, where bodies found healing and souls found recognition, we discovered that sometimes the most radical act is simply being authentic, allowing ourselves to be seen without masks, without performance, without the exhausting effort of being everything to everyone. In those warm waters, women found permission to be human, to be tired, to be tender, to be true. And in the library, among the scrolls and the scholars, we witness the ultimate act of faith, women preserving knowledge not for immediate reward, but for generations they would never meet, minds they would never know, futures they could barely imagine. They understood, as we must understand, that what we do matters, that what we preserve, what we protect, what we pass on, creates ripples that extend far beyond our ability to see. The incense continues to rise, carrying with it all these stories, all these moments of connection, all these quiet acts of love and courage and hope. The smoke dissipates but does not disappear. It becomes part of the air, part of the atmosphere, part of the eternal presence that surrounds us always. And perhaps this is the greatest truth these ancient women have to teach us, that we are never truly alone. That every woman who has ever felt the weight of others' expectations, who has ever yearned for authentic connection, who has ever found sanctuary in friendship, who has ever claimed her voice in small but significant ways, who has ever loved deeply despite uncertainty, who has ever preserved something beautiful for the future, is part of this endless mosaic, this eternal pattern of resilience and grace. Their love endures in every fountain that flows, every library that opens its doors, every circle of women who gather to share their truth, every moment when someone feels truly seen, truly known, truly held. Their stories live on in our stories. Their courage becomes our courage. Their hope becomes our hope. Their rest becomes our rest, as we settle into sleep knowing we are held by something larger than ourselves, something as ancient as olive groves and as eternal as the stars, something that whispers softly in the darkness that we are enough. We have always been enough, and in the morning light we will carry forward their legacy of quiet strength and boundless love, adding our own threads to the endless tapestry, our own voices to the eternal song, our own light to the sacred flame that burns on and on through all the nights and all the days, connecting us across time, across space, across the beautiful mystery of what it means to be human, to be woman, to be home,